Hi there, my name is Jonathan Baumgart. I'm the CEO of Atomic Consulting. In today's video, I want to compare two offshore licensed jurisdictions, Mauritius and Seychelles. So let's get started. Okay, given our team's experience in offshore licensing, we're often asked to compare and contrast different jurisdictions. And I would say by far, Mauritius and Seychelles tend to be the most popular. We can maybe rank Vanuatu, but I would place that as a distant third. So for this reason, I wanted to provide a comparison and contrast some of the differences, advantages, disadvantages, if you will, of these regions because they come up quite often in discussion. So I think if you're looking at either of these jurisdictions, it would help to know what to look out for, what you'll have to sacrifice, and what advantages there are. So we are going to start out with banking as the first concept to discuss here. Okay, so it's our opinion that of the two jurisdictions, Mauritius will be better on the banking side. Now, what do I mean by better? Well, banking is difficult for the online FX and CFD industry no matter where you go. Something that people who are new to this industry don't realize is even if you have a license in Europe, for example, an FCA license or a license in the European Union like in Cyprus, it is very difficult to get access to top-tier banking. What I mean by that is if you ever visit a major city and you look at the skyscrapers, you'll see some very famous names. Those banks are almost unattainable in our industry. It's viewed as too high risk. And the same theme applies offshore. And something that many of those new to licensing, not only offshore, but throughout the world, don't understand is a license does not guarantee a bank account. Now, in some regions, you have to put in capital beforehand, so there are banks that are willing to work with you and cooperate, but that's not often the case. And in our opinion, Seychelles tends to be tougher when it comes to banking. Now, is it impossible? No, but it is very difficult. And it's really going to depend on the background of the broker, the ownership structure. So what I mean by that is if this is a new broker, if this is a startup, if you have no other licensing, I don't recommend Seychelles because we think it might be too difficult to get a bank account and you may end up not even finding a local option, having to rely instead on what are known as neobanks or e-wallets. And it kind of defeats the purpose of licensing altogether. So if you're an established broker that has licenses across multiple jurisdictions, it does become easier. But even then, the options are limited. You probably are only going to be able to choose from one or two banks. In Mauritius, however, it's much more flexible. Guarantee is not a word we like to use when it comes to licensing applications. However, I would say that in Mauritius, we have a very high level of confidence that we can get you a bank account. And we have a very strong track record in Mauritius to back that up. Seychelles, I cannot say the same thing. Now, it has nothing to do with our team's lack of expertise because we can't control the banks. The banks make the decision themselves. So if your motivation for getting this license relies heavily on banking, then in my view, Mauritius would be the better choice. And I'll repeat, that's not to say it's impossible to get a bank account in Seychelles, but if this is a startup broker, if there's no prior experience, everything is new, the chances go down. The best options for banking in Seychelles are for multi-licensed brokers, preferably a license in Europe, in Asia, Australia, or even other offshore regions. Then the chances go up. So let's move on to the next subject, which is application speed and processing time. So when it comes to the speed of getting license approval, Mauritius wins out without a doubt. One can expect in Mauritius to get a license in roughly 5 to 6 months. Now, I have to be very careful here. I don't want that to be written in stone. There are many, many times where this can take longer. It is very much subjective. It's going to depend on how complex the structure is. It's going to depend on the background of the directors, the experience level of the different owners, if the broker holds other licenses, etc. But one can use that as a guideline. On the theme of guidelines, I cannot say the same about Seychelles. Seychelles, it's going to be over 6 months, and then it really varies. We've seen applications approach the 12-month mark. It doesn't always have to be that long, but it can take quite a while. Much slower, in my opinion, compared to Mauritius. So once again, if you need a license very quickly, frankly speaking, I know a lot of people say 6 months is too long. That's actually very good. I've done another video comparing real licenses to fake licenses, and there's a reason it takes this period of time. Now, I wish a license could be approved instantly, but that's just not the reality. I've warned against such licenses. 6 months is very good. On the other hand, 6 months plus, like 8 going into a year, is just too much. It's unnecessary in my view. I don't think such time is needed. But if you're looking at Seychelles, that is what you can expect, and it's something that you should consider. As a final point, the biggest challenge we have in the consulting space is I often come across ads, brochures from other firms that will offer very aggressive approval times. They'll say that they can get Mauritius in 2 months or Seychelles in 4 months. I disagree. I think this is impossible. And my feedback is the following. Look, I appreciate competition. As a rule, I don't like to bash the competition. My advice is this: get that in writing in the agreement. And if that consulting company can promise, let's say, 2 months or 3 months in Mauritius, then that should be in the agreement. And if it fails for any reason, there should be a financial penalty for each month that it's not delivered. I think that that's the best way to keep these kind of promises honest. That's what I would suggest when it comes up. But I can tell you these times are very realistic, and that comes from our years of experience getting these licenses. So the bottom line is Mauritius is faster when it comes to approval period. So now I want to cover reputation and popularity. So from our experience on the consulting side, where we talk to startups, prop firms, liquidity providers, tech companies, brokers, I would say Seychelles, for whatever reason, is more desirable. I'm often asked about this license. It's often a top choice among startups. I can't really tell you why. As you can see, there are some limitations to this license. But there's definitely an opinion in the industry overall that Seychelles carries a higher reputation. Now, that's not to say Mauritius doesn't, but if I were to conduct an online poll, my prediction would be that Seychelles would win out. If it were a popularity contest, that would be the first choice. Now, this may play a role in your decision. I think it's a toss-up. If you're a multi-licensed broker, you have a good track record, you have experienced directors, there it's a tough choice with Seychelles. I would want to have a call and help you really hash out the pros and cons to decide. It's tough. You may want to lean towards Seychelles in the end. If you're a startup, this is the first time you're getting a license, you don't have much experience, and on the same token, I would rule out Seychelles. I just think it's going to be too difficult for approval. Once again, there are firms that promise the world. We rely heavily on our track record, on our past execution. My opinion comes from experience. And, I would be cautious if a company is approaching you, saying how easy it is and everything else. Because I'm going here on video, on record, saying the opposite. And it's much easier for me just to say, hey, Seychelles is great, come sign up. I feel in this video I'm trying to do is give you the information you need to make a very careful decision. Because even if you go for Mauritius, going back to the previous point, you're looking at 6 months. It is not cheap to get any license. So it's a very important decision to make. and you should have all the information available to you before doing so. So I hope that helps. The last point, which I'll discuss, are the costs. So from a cost perspective, I find the licenses are almost the same, and this is really not something worth considering. The capital in Seychelles is 50,000 USD. In Mauritius, it's around 33,000 USD, which is a toss-up in my opinion. The monthly ongoing expenses are more or less the same in terms of office and local staff. It's slightly more expensive in Seychelles because it's a bit harder to find experienced directors, but there is not a massive cost difference that would make that a part of the decision process. Meaning, if you were to really compare on costs, it's a toss-up. I don't think for either region it makes much of a difference. That's different from other places, though. So just keep that in mind. Costs are often quite different. For example, if you're getting a license in the UK, that's much, much more expensive than anything offshore. So from costs, it's a toss-up. So I'd like just to kind of wrap up and summarize this discussion. So, ultimately, the license that you decide upon is going to be based on your preferences. Sometimes clients ask, well, which would you take? And I can't make that decision for you. I don't like to, because I don't want to show a bias. What I like to do is present the facts and also my opinion based on our experience. So if we're to look at both hand in hand, we can say that Seychelles is more popular. We can say that it's also more attractive if you're a multi-licensed broker. If you're a startup, Mauritius is better in terms of getting approved. Banking is also better in Mauritius, regardless of the broker's background. So these are the factors that you need to consider. There's no real preferable license, like I mentioned. It really depends on your preferences, your level of experience. But these are some key factors to think about. Of course, it's an important decision. So if you would like to explore either of these options in more detail, then you definitely want to contact our team. You can book a call with one of our consultants or myself, and we'd be happy to outline the licensing process with you in more detail. We have many years experience in the licensing space, not just offshore, but in Europe, Asia, all over the globe. So I'm confident we will be the right partner to help you get an offshore license or any license that you're interested in. And we also have licenses on sale, so that's something to keep in mind. I will put a link to that in the description below. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel, We welcome any comments and feedback, so if there's a specific question you had or a video theme you'd like us to present in the future, let us know. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future. Bye.